I'm Dennis Traynor Jr. Welcome to Acronym TV. This week, Kshama Sawant proves that a socialist can not only get elected in this country, but she can get re-elected. Also, Quentin Tarantino doubles down on his statements at an anti-police brutality rally, calling out white supremacy. But first, let's honor Veterans Day. In The Charge of the Light Brigade, the poet Alfred Lord Tennyson succinctly sums up the role of the soldier, writing, quote, "Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die." Very simple. The chain of command is not to be broken or the machine will not function at all. In his official proclamation reminding us of the reason we honor our nation's veterans every November 11th, the president issues a proclamation each year stating, quote, "With respect for and in recognition of the contributions of our service members have made to the cause of peace and freedom in the world, November 11th of each year shall be set aside as a legal public holiday." No one participating in or observing Veterans Day this November 11th will mistake the proceedings to be dedicated to the cause of world peace. Please. Celebrating Veterans Day American style means celebrating war and the people who wage it. It's who we are. It's what we export. Should we even be celebrating Veterans Day? I mean, was there some kind of mix-up along the way? Didn't we miss something that was supposed to happen on the 11th? On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, fighting stopped in the war to end all war. A war that left approximately 17 million dead and another 20 million wounded. Congress passed Armistice Day, a resolution calling for, quote, exercises designated to perpetuate peace through goodwill and mutual understanding, inviting the people of the United States to observe the day in the schools and churches with appropriate ceremonies of friendly relations with all other peoples. Later, Congress declared that November 11th was to be, quote, a day dedicated to the cause of world peace. The peace treaty that officially ended the Great War, the Treaty of Versailles, has ironically been the basis for much more war. Stage managed by U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, the treaty was brutal for the German Empire. Hitler rose to power amid the atmosphere of German nationalism made inevitable by that treaty, leading to a sequel, World War II, which ended not with the symmetry of 11-11-11, but with the poetry of Robert Oppenheimer, who said of his atomic bomb, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." With the incineration of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Pandora's box was opened, unleashing a world of perpetual war. In the Greek myth, the only thing left in Pandora's box is hope. We elected Hope. Here in the United States, he won a Nobel Peace Prize and promptly drew up a kill list and started working his way through it. So it goes. Also emerging from that Treaty of Versailles, 9 new countries were established, drawing a new map to create the modern Middle East. Fast forward 100 years, and we have ISIS trying to erase the ink of those colonial cartographers with the blood of its beheaded enemies in the region. Even the empire-enabling CNBC says of ISIS that its, quote, its heinous terror acts are reprehensible. Yet it has a legitimate grievance against Western countries that carved up the Middle East with blatant disregard for tribal and sectarian affiliations of the local population. That ISIS has emerged from the power vacuum created by the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq by U.S. troops means 100 years of not reasoning why, of just doing and dying that have made the cruel mockery of the original intent of Armistice Day. You can say Armistice Day and its mandate for peace was invaded, occupied, and destroyed by Veterans Day. To prop up this occupation, we tell each other the lie that soldiers do and die and do not reason why protects more than our freedom, but our very way of life. And actually, there's some truth to that. For a very powerful minority, you see. Soldiers are, as U.S. General Smedley Butler said of himself after 33 years of military service, merely racketeers or gangsters for capitalism. So, if you have leveraged the psychotic tendencies within you to climb to the top of the capitalist food chain and enjoy the feast at a banquet table with other sharks who would eat you alive just to increase the bulge in their portfolio, while the rest of us informs more or less extreme grovel beneath your table like paupers at a Dickensian pageant, then congratulations. United States soldiers, the majority of them victims of an economic draft, do fight, kill, die, maim, and get maimed, all for your way of life. To fully support the troops this Veterans Day, listen to those veterans, like the Veterans for Peace, who have taken the lead in celebrating Armistice Day on November 11th in an effort to reclaim the original intention of that day, a worldwide call for peace that was spurred by universal revulsion at the huge slaughter of World War I. So that we can no longer simply do and die, we must begin to reason why. I'm Dennis Traynor Jr., and you are watching Acronym TV. What do you stand for? Acronym TV is individually produced and individually supported by viewers like you at acronymtv.com. Further underwriting is provided by Occupy.com. Occupy.com is a news and media channel amplifying the voices of the global 99%. Find out more and support at Occupy.com. Kshama Sawant won re-election to Seattle's City Council in a victory that we should all applaud. Her victory came despite significant outside spending attempting to unseat her, proving, as her campaign says, quote, not only can socialists get elected, we can get re-elected. Christopher Hedges, writing about this election back in March, made the case that Sawant's race was to be one of the most important elections in the country this year, stating that her fight was our own fight. At her victory speech, she made that clear.
This victory, this vote, is a strong victory for all working class people, for the socialist movement, and for independent working class politics. The complacent media pundits were wrong. Socialist politics are here to stay.
Last fall, the fall of 2014, I caught up with Sawant at the Climate Justice March in New York City, where she talked about the importance of an independent political party of the left, not mentioning the Green Party.
Whether you're fighting for climate change or for racial justice, the main question that the US left has to grapple with is in 2016, if the left does not run a really powerful fighting challenge to the two parties, it's going to be Hillary Clinton and some climate change denying Republican. That's not going to be good.
Are you declaring your candidacy for president in 2016 right now?
No, what I'm doing is appealing for people on the left that we should come together, we should discuss, we should have national meetings, national conferences, so that we can discuss what we can do about this. At a meeting last night where I spoke alongside Bernie Sanders, Naomi Klein, Chris Hedges, and Bill McKibben, I called on Bernie Sanders to run as an independent, as a genuine independent, openly challenging the Democratic Party, running on an anti-corporate, pro-working class campaign of taxing corporations to fund a green jobs program, to cancel student debt, and for affordable housing and single-payer healthcare. That campaign, people talk about, well, Bernie Sanders can't win as an independent. That's not the point. The point is that if we can run a genuine fighting working class campaign for the presidential election, it will be a pole of attraction to millions of people who are hungry for an alternative.
He's not going to run as an independent, is he?
I think it depends on what people demand. We need for a strong campaign on the left. And we need to look at this not just in electoral terms. It is not just about running a campaign and then saying, well, if I just get 5%, what's the use? That's not the point. The point is that if you run that campaign, it helps to galvanize the future of social movements. Social movements, if we can build them strong enough, it doesn't matter who's in the White House in 2017. We know it's going to be a big business Democrat or a big business Republican. But social movements can grow nonetheless, and a left campaign for president can help bring that together.
Again, that was an interview that took place in September of 2014 at the Climate Justice March. At her victory speech last night, Sawant continued to navigate around what she called the pole of attraction that is Bernie Sanders, even as she made the assertion that there's not going to be any solutions coming from the Democratic Party.
The coming battle between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton will clarify to tens of thousands that the Democratic Party is not a tool that can be used to fight for the interests of the working class.
It's not surprising or even disappointing that a political party like the Socialist Alternative or a politician like Kshama Sawant would be trying to capture the momentum of the Bernie Sanders wave and channel the energy of all the people who will have nowhere to go once Bernie Sanders drops out of the race and endorses Hillary Clinton in May or April. What is confusing and a question for members of the so-called left is why the Green Party has not established itself as the independent party of the left. Now, full disclosure, I worked as communications director for Jill Stein for a short time and helped create this video. But why is Jill Stein and the Green Party not the independent party of the left?
The biggest way people give up power is by not knowing that we have it to start with. Well, we've got it, and we're going to use it. And it doesn't come from the big corporate political parties that are bought and paid for by Wall Street. Their choices are not our choices. Their candidates are not our candidates. Their economy is not our economy. Their government is not our government. Their prisons are not our prisons. Their police are not our police. And their endless wars are not our wars. And their recovery for the few is not our recovery. The 1% is quaking in their boots because we're waking up to the fact that we have the power and we're going to use it. We have the power to make the minimum wage a living wage. We have the power to turn the tide on climate change. We have the power to create a welcoming path to citizenship. We have the power to end the racist war on drugs. It's in our hands. Together, we can build a world that puts people and the planet and peace over profit. That's in our hands. Our power to create this new world. It's not in our hopes. It's not in our dreams. It's in our hands. Thank you.
In other election news, Lawrence Lessig dropped out of the 2016 presidential race. Until recently, Lessig's campaign was a unique, single-issue one: get elected so he could pass the Citizen Equality Act of 2017, a law that would change campaign finance, expand voter protections, and change how voting districts are drawn. Once that law was going to be passed, he was going to quit the White House and let his vice president take over. That plan didn't go over well. Recently, in an effort to revive his campaign, he went back on his one and only campaign promise, vowing to stay in office if elected. But in a video posted online Monday, Lessig conceded that the Democrats would never let him in the debates, and without that visibility, his campaign had no chance.
Now, from the start, it was clear that getting into the Democratic debates was the essential step in this campaign. I may be known in tiny corners of the tubes of the internets, but I am not well known to the American public generally. Our only chance to make this issue central to the 2016 presidential election was to be in those debates. I must today end my campaign for the Democratic nomination and turn to the question of how best to continue to press for this reform now.
Lessig seems to leave open the possibility that he may seek to revive his one campaign plank as an independent, and at least 2 lawsuits to open up the presidential debates are in progress. Depending on how those lawsuits play out will be a major factor to decide if Lessig and other third-party candidates or independent candidates will get a crack at debating Hillary Clinton and Marco Rubio. Yes, that was a prediction. Prove me wrong. The film director Quentin Tarantino remains under attack from police union thugs for calling the killing of unarmed people by armed police murder victims and their killers murderers.
And I have to call the murdered, and I have to call the murderers the murderers. That comment caught the attention of the New York City Police Union, which said in a statement, "It's no surprise that someone who makes a living glorifying crime and violence is a cop hater too. Police officers that Quentin Tarantino calls murderers aren't living in one of his depraved big screen fantasies. They're risking and sometimes sacrificing their lives to protect communities from real crime and mayhem. New Yorkers need to send a message to this purveyor of degeneracy that he has no business coming to our city to peddle his slanderous cop fiction. It's time for a boycott of Quentin Tarantino's films." I first saw the news of this, and my first thought was, wow, what was Quentin Tarantino doing at this march in New York City? How did you come to be at that event?
Well, the organization who put it on was, it's called Rise Up October. And they got in touch with me because I had made statements in some interviews, along the way that had suggested that I'm on their side when it comes to this issue of, ultimately what I feel is a problem of white supremacy in this country.
That's correct, white people. Like me, like Quentin, you are the beneficiary of unearned white privilege. I'm not going to insult your intelligence, nor should you insult the other members of this club we were born into by cataloging the laundry list of data that point to the clear fact that, taken as a whole, people who are or who present as white experience privileges that are regularly denied to people who do not present as white. One of those privileges is that we are much less likely to be murdered by a cop. It's a fact. Deal with it. Shortly after the march in which Tarantino participated, I spoke with principal organizer from Rise Up October, Carl Dix, and that interview follows.
What am I doing here? I'm doing here because I am a human being with a conscience. And when I see murder, I cannot stand by. And I have to call the murdered, and I have to call the murderers, the murderers.
In New York City last weekend, the Rise Up October march made history, bringing 100 families of police murder victims marching alongside Cornel West, Carl Dix, Eve Ensler, Jamal Joseph, and Quentin Tarantino, and among others, demanding that police terror must stop and asking people to answer a simple question: which side are you on? The march and protest marked the 20th annual march for the October 22nd Coalition to Stop Police Brutality, Repression, and the Criminalization of a Generation, which has been mobilizing every year since 1996 for a national day of protest, working to expose the epidemic of police brutality. A principal organizer of the Rise Up October March, which was the culmination of 3 days of action, actually, is Carl Dix. Carl is a co-founder with Dr. Cornel West of the Stop Mass Incarceration Network and has spent his life opposing injustice. He's a representative of the Revolutionary Communist Party and a guest in the past on Acronym TV. Carl, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Dennis.
20 years is a long time. For many, watching and participating in the hashtag that has become a movement, Black Lives Matter, that has become this historical moment we are now living in, is the long moral arc finally bending towards justice? In other words, what has changed in the 20 years of organizing to stop police brutality, repression, and the criminalization of a generation?
Look, the long moral arc only bends where the people's struggle takes it. And what's changed in the last 20 years really is after Ferguson. There was a way in which young people in Ferguson had it when Michael Brown was murdered. They were horrified by this young man being gunned down by this cop with his hands up. But also it sinks in with the brutality and murder that many other people in Ferguson had experienced. They took to the streets and they refused to get out of the streets, even with tear gas being thrown at them, rubber bullet shots, National Guard mobilizations, armored personnel carriers, and police with military assault rifles. And I went to Ferguson a few days after and saw that these young people, they were in a different mode. You know, there were Crips and Bloods out there together protesting police murder and saying to me, last week I'd have been shooting at him and he'd have been shooting at me. This week, we got a common problem that we're coming together to deal with, the way the police are killing us. And this infected things all across the country in a way that we hadn't seen that kind of resistance to the police getting away with murder in decades. It was inspiring and heartening to the people, but it was like terrifying to the system, and they have moved to try to shut it down, force it back in the bottle, get things to go back to normal, a normal that includes police murdering people, especially Black and Latino people, and getting exonerated just about every time they do it. Cornell West, decided that we could not allow this movement to be suppressed. And that's why we issued the call for Rise Up October. And it was actually organized by a coalition of groupings, including the Stop Mass Incarceration Network, October 22nd Coalition. But also we partnered with groupings like Sankofa.org. There were Green Party chapters who were involved. The Justice League in New York City came into the picture, and many other individuals and organizations. It was really important for people to say, look, we're seeing these killings, and I mean we're seeing them, because many of them are recorded on video.
Right.
So you're looking at them, and they're unjust and illegitimate, and they have to stop, and people have to pick a side. You can't look at it and say, oh, that's terrible, but how often does it happen? Because now it's happening all the time. You can't say, well, there's good on both sides. No, police are killing unarmed innocent people. It's got to stop, and you got to decide, are you with the people acting to stop it, or are you on the side that says it's okay for it to continue happening?
Some of the early headlines that are being made out of the protests involve Quentin Tarantino. I wasn't in New York, so I don't know how much he was involved, or if he was just a celebrity ally who kind of swooped in the last moments. I suspect the latter. Within the movement, we have our own celebrity in Dr. Cornell West, although outside of our little vertical, perhaps not as big a celebrity as someone like Quentin Tarantino. How important is celebrity participation or endorsement of these movements? And if so, where are the African-American celebrities outside of the vertical of activist celebrities and their participation?
Okay, got a couple things here. Let me go out and separate them out. In terms of the involvement of prominent voices that have a big platform in society, we need much more of that. And you're talking about Quentin Tarantino. He's somebody who told me that he felt the which side are you on was us talking to him and challenging him to actually act on something that he had been feeling for the past few years. He saw that something wrong was happening, and this struck him as a vehicle for him acting. And we welcome that. In fact, there's not enough celebrity involvement of people, white celebrities, black celebrities. There are some, but not enough. And particularly, there's a sharp thing when you talk about black popular culture, music, other angles of that. There are some people who are doing things like Khalid Kweli and Nas dropped a song titled Which Side Are You On October 22nd. A song in a video which starts out with the police murder of Michael Brown and very clearly situates itself on the side of people acting to stop these horrors. The problem is that they stand out by their involvement because most other celebrities in that arena aren't taking that step. At the same time, they're also trying to change the story because a police officer was killed a couple days, October 20th, a couple days before this activity. Rise Up October started out, and some of the media outlets stepped to us and said, shouldn't you have postponed your action? Wasn't it insensitive of you to go ahead with this protest? We had to tell them, look, let's actually look at the reality. This year, from January 1st to today, over 930 people have been killed by police. About 300 of them, the police acknowledged, were innocent and unarmed, not doing anything wrong when they were killed by police.
And how many convictions are going to come out of those? None.
Or none. We will see, because we're fighting for justice in these cases. But so far, in most of the cases, the cops were exonerated. Mm-hmm. In time period, there have been fewer than 25 cases of police on duty losing their lives. So there's a great imbalance here, and don't try to switch the subject from police getting away with murder to, well, the real problem is there's a war on cops, because there isn't one. And in fact, the number of cops who've been killed in the last year is less than the year before that. So don't blame our protest activity for some kind of non-existent wave of killings of police, because it ain't what's happening. What's still happening, and it has been happening, is that police are killing people in all kinds of horrible circumstances and getting away with it. That has to stop, and we're going to have to stop and welcome and encourage everybody who sees this stuff for what it is to be a part of acting with us to stop it.
Carl, last question. You talked before, and I glossed over it. I want to go back to it a little bit about the connection between police brutality and murder and capitalism. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think I know that you don't think that capitalism is compatible with the kind of change that you're fighting for. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you see, this is a very important point. We should live in a society, in a world, where those who are entrusted with public security would sooner risk or lose their own lives, than kill or injure an innocent person. But we live in a society where cops kill children, cops kill grandmothers, cops kill people who are unarmed and innocent. Cops get called out because somebody's having a mental episode. The family calls 911, the police respond, and very often they brutalize and murder the people that they're being called to help. And when the system says, well, we got to give this cop the benefit of the doubt. Now think about that. Cops, a 12-year-old boy who has a toy gun, and then you give the cops the benefit of the doubt, the so-called trained law enforcement personnel. That is upside down, but it is in keeping with the logic of the system, which is that property most important to protect, and that people are actually to be feared, especially people that this system has no future for, which is the case for a great portion of this young generation of black people, Latinos growing up. They view them as a threat. They remember the 1960s and what young black people did back then that inspired other people to get involved in radical and even revolutionary movements and rock the system back on its heels. They're desperate to keep that from happening this time, and they're trying to get out in front of it by criminalizing, demonizing people, and then unleashing their cops, their courts, and their prisons to keep them under control. That's what we're dealing with, and it is an assault of genocidal proportions that we cannot stand by and let happen. We have to fight it, and at the same time, I'm going to bring out the people that it's going to take revolution, nothing less, to end this once and for all.
Carl Dix, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate you coming on the program.
Thank you, Dennis.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Dennis Traynor Jr., and this is Acronym TV. What do you stand for?